Hello, Mr. Ambassador. I'm very grateful to have an opportunity to talk with such an important figure as you. You have a vast and major experience in the international relations and diplomacy. Thank you for being here with us.
My pleasure. Happy to talk to the UNA Poland.
Yes, that's it. Thank you very much. And the first thing, which is for me very important, I've seen a lot of information in the media that in the Belarus right now, when there are huge protests concerning free elections, there is going on kind of misinformation that the Poland is very, very opposing, that actually Poland, US, Germany, whole Europe is trying to almost attack, do a coup in Belarus. What is your perspective on that situation? What do you think will evolve from that whole tensions?
Main lesson so far in Belarus is that people just don't like living under tyranny. It's not what people want. And I mention this because there is a theory that authoritarianism, Putinism, or the Chinese system is somehow more efficient, and that people want to live in an orderly system, even if it is not a free system. Now, I'm old enough to remember this theory applied to communism. There were people in the West who really did believe that communism might be bad, but it was somehow more efficient. Well, it turned out to be bad and decidedly inefficient. In fact, ineffective. So that is the first lesson. This is not about the Belarusian people demanding NATO membership or EU membership. This is about the Belarusian people just wanting to have control over their own country, free elections, to live in a normal place. Now, you mentioned earlier that Poland is being accused of all sorts of things. Well, of course, what did you expect? The Russian disinformation machine is probably hard at work, claiming that Poland is doing all sorts of terrible things, or the Panovia are about to retake Grodno, and the landlords are back. This is like the Russians claiming that the democratic movement and the Maidan was exclusively Ukrainian fascist, Banderishchi. This is, of course, nonsense, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Russian troll farm, the Internet Research Agency in St. Petersburg, was already active, creating fake so-called Polish accounts disguised as Polish nationalists. I wouldn't be surprised at all. That's what they do. They do it in the United States. The West needs to unite in support of the Belarusian people. We need to support mediation, probably under the OSCE, to bring about new elections. We need to meet with the Belarusian opposition, including that part of the opposition that's taken refuge in Vilnius, in a free country. And we need to signal clearly to the Russians that they do not own Belarus, that there will be a price to be paid if they intervene. Now, this is easier said than done, because the Russians might not intervene a la Czechoslovakia in 1968. They might try a softer approach of having Lukashenko wait out and slowly smother, figuratively speaking, the demonstrations and supporting him while they do. We've seen this already by the Russians sending in their propagandists to replace the television, the Belarusian citizens on television who have gone on strike because they don't want to give false information over the news. So I think Putin is going to try to crush these demonstrations, but we are 40 years and 2 days away from the Gdansk Accords, signed August 31st, 1980. And I remember perfectly well how skeptical the West was that the Polish people would ever be free. It was considered impossible. Now it is considered inevitable. It was neither. It was not inevitable. It was not impossible. It was possible. And the difference between not succeeding and succeeding depended first of all then on the Polish people and on the Belarusian people now. But we in the free world, now Poland is, right there with us. We need to be prepared to support the Belarusian people over the longer term. It's their country, it's their choice, but there are things we can do.
That's really very inspirational, I would say, thoughts. I'm also really grateful for mentioning the Poland on this. That's really great to hear all of these words.
The Polish example is relevant. Both 40 years ago with the first Solidarity and in 1989 and in the years immediately after 1989. Not only the Poles, the Baltics, others, Slovakia, they all succeeded, and it wasn't easy. But we need to remember this success. Like, I get it, Polish politics is tak rozdzielona jak polityko w moim kraju. Yeah, I get it. But Poles have succeeded, and that profound success is something that people in Ukraine today admire and look up to. And we need to remember this.
I believe that's one of the values that is right now uniting, I would say, a bit quarreling Polish people that are talking about politics today. The value of independence, the value of freedom that we have gained along the years. And I completely agree with your words concerning the freedom and the will of the Belarus people to have this freedom. It's really great to hear such thing, but thinking about that, about this, as you mentioned, the, let's say, more Russian, Chinese, or this part of the country, of the world, countries with their, let's say, maybe not regimes, but the political structures, and the more Western, more modernized, let's say, modernized cultures, just like United States, like the United Europe. Don't you think that the current situation on the Belarus could be another root of the problems or tensions between USA and China, for example? Could that be, the Belarus could be something like a proxy war?
Well, Belarus is more a potential source of tension with Russia than with China. But I want to be cautious. I remember in the 1980s that there were some in Western Europe and even a few in the United States who used exactly that argument to caution against support for solidarity, that it would be destabilizing in relations with the Soviet Union, and that some believed that solidarity itself was destabilizing. Now, I profoundly disagreed at the time with that view. And that view turned out to look rather ridiculous in retrospect. Solidarity was not destabilizing. In fact, the Polish democratic and patriotic movement, and those two were united, patriotism and democracy. That movement turned out to be profoundly stabilizing because it was the Soviet imposed system then, and it is the Russian imposed system now, which is destabilizing because people in Ukraine and Belarus simply, as it turns out, don't want to live under tyranny. And efforts to force them to live under tyranny produce unstable and destabilizing reactions. democracy is more stabilizing. I mean, look at Europe today. Germany and Poland may have, rhetorical fireworks sometimes, but Polish-German trade is greater than German-Russian trade. It's bigger. Germany is surrounded by friends. We don't have a German problem in Europe. And this is very largely thanks to the fall of the Iron Curtain and the reunification of Germany, and the fact that the EU and NATO expanded to embrace all of Europe that was west of the old Soviet Union. That's a big deal. And a lot of people can take credit. Freedom is stabilizing. Democracy is stabilizing. The Russians think that autocracy is the only stabilizing thing, but look at their history. How stable is that? I mean, really, Russian Revolution, Stalinism, Hitler's good friend Adolf Hitler. I mean, Stalin's good friend Adolf Hitler. The alliances among tyrants don't work out. Alliances among democracies do tend to work out. And someday, I think Russia will relearn that lesson. I am not one of these people that believes that Russia will always be as it is under Putin. I believe that Russia has the potential to be much better off. I'm not anti-Russian at all. I'm not much of a fan of Vladimir Putin, but I'm not anti-Russian because I believe the Russian people can be better than Putin says they can be. I mean, think about it.
That's again very inspiring words. I believe that, to be honest, that was one of the words when I was in my university. That was the first of the words of my economics professor, who said that the thing that is keeping the world together is the trade and actually freedom of speech. Thanks to that we can communicate with each other and we can trust each other because we're supporting each other and we are trading with each other. Therefore, we are both dependent from each other, but also we are trusting each other. We don't have any need for tensions, but we have need for cooperation. I think that these words and these values are, I would say, crucial at the current times. Would you agree with that?
I would put it this way. I believe in the free world, or as it is termed sometimes, the liberal world order. Wolny świat, innymi słowami. Wolny świat, wierzę w to. And I believe in it not because I think it's perfect, because it isn't. And not because it doesn't have problems, because it does. And it constantly needs to be fixed. I mean, my God, look at the United States and Western Europe today, filled with problems and stresses and tensions. And many people in the United States feel that the free world system and the trading system hasn't worked out well for them. But it's better than the competition. I mean, think about the competition. What, communism, fascism, spheres of influence and great powers, might makes right. That's the competition in the real world. And if you compare the free world system that the United States led after 1945 and extended after 1989, you can come up with a very long list of American blunders and mistakes. And there are a lot of them. But you can also come up with an even more impressive list of achievements, like Europe rebuilt and prosperous, and no World War III, and the collapse of the Soviet Union without a world war. This is serious stuff. Oh, yes, and 3 generations of prosperity, including the last generation, arguably the best generation in Poland's history, either from Zygmunt Czechiwasa or Stefan Batory. You can have a discussion about that. That's the free world compared to the competition. And Poland, by the way, is a co-author of this free world as it grew in Europe after 1989. So yeah, I believe in it, but saying it's a good thing doesn't mean that its mistakes don't need to be corrected, because they do. There are a lot of problems, and we need to take it seriously, but we don't need to look at Putin or even Chinese President Xi as the people with the answers. I mean, China's deserves a very long discussion, but I still believe that democracy provides us the tools to get to the answers we need.
That's very, I would say, not again inspiring, but I would say very gives a lot of food for thought, and especially as mentioned the democracy in Europe and development that we as a Polish people experience a lot. And as you shown us, you have a great knowledge about our history. Thank you for that. But I would say, I would like to ask you about something completely different right now. I would say something which is more closely related to the United States and Poland. That is situation in Iran, and should I say on the Middle East. First of all, we all know that the tensions between US and Iran, they are there for long, long years, and now they're becoming, I would say, very, very, maybe not dangerous, but worrying. And I wanted to ask about the perspective of yours on this situation, the new leader of Iran, and the fact that happened just recently. That is the landing of the Israeli flight in United Arab Emirates, which was called by the leader of Iran as a betraying of Muslim world. That is, I would say, a quite big deal to hear something like that from other fellow Muslim in that part of the world. And I wanted to ask, what is your view on that?
Oh, this is worthy of a very long discussion. But I will say this. The United States and Iran have been at odds ever since 1979, the fall of the Shah, the seizing of our embassy, and the holding hostage of American diplomats. And we, the Americans and the Iranians, have had difficulty ever since. The origins of this conflict are complicated, and America bears some of the responsibility. We supported the Shah of Iran probably too long, and we didn't care that he was tyrannical. We just cared that he was reliably pro-American, and we did not develop the kinds of ties with Iranian society that we should have. But having said that, Iran is a source of danger in the world. They export wars and terrorism. This isn't made up, this is real. Their nuclear program was a genuine threat. They are an exporter of great instability. At the same time, the Iranian people, by everything I've heard, and including from European ambassadors who are in Iran, are not actually anti-American. Some are, but many are not, particularly the educated people and the upper middle classes. So we should not be anti-Iranian. We Americans have a problem with the current government. Now, the end of the Bush administration and Obama administration sought diplomacy to try to resolve perhaps the most dangerous single issue in American-Iranian relations, which was their pursuit of nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles. And the agreement, the Iran nuclear deal that was developed is imperfect and incomplete, but it's a lot better than nothing, which was the alternative. I think the Trump administration made a mistake pulling out of this agreement because we isolated ourselves. I think the best policy toward Iran would be one in which the United States found a way back to the Iran nuclear deal and sought additional arrangements to deal with destabilizing Iranian behavior, working with our allies, particularly the French, who have a pretty strong view and a solid view of Iran. And we should reach out to the Iranian people. So I'm not saying that we should make a big détente with Iran, but I am saying that we need to have a policy that doesn't isolate us, we Americans. And I fear that that is what Trump has done. Now, there is much more to say, and frankly, there are more knowledgeable Americans than me to say it. But you asked a fair question, and I wanted to give you an honest answer to the best of my ability.
According to what you said, in both situations about both Russia and Iran, I see that you mentioned that you are not anti-nation, but you're skeptical to their leaders.
Right.
So there's a question now, how do you believe we could, as a modern world, try to reach these people, try to start a new thing of, let's say, liberation movement, the liberation thought among the citizens? Because as you said, the people are already willing not to be under the tyranny, but the question is how to start creating the movements among themselves, how to create the will to move their true intentions into the actions.
This reaching out to people should be an element in our foreign policy generally. The our in this case is US, but also European and Polish. Reaching out to the Russian people and countering some of Putin's propaganda. Challenging Putin's narrative, by the way, about World War II. And what Putin says about Poland is just historically false. But also making it clear to the Russians that we're not against them. We don't think that they're inferior or stupid or violent or, you know, have a slave mentality. That's all nonsense. That's all nonsense. We need to support free media in Russia and free Russian media outside of Russia. With respect to Iran, we probably should do the same. I'm sorry that we don't have an American embassy or interest section in Iran. I know that sounds like I'm dreaming, but there's nothing like being on the ground and meeting people to help. So there are things we can do. It also means that we need to have a dialogue with the government, and I'm not against it. I don't think a dialogue, even with, you know, the current Russian government is a bad thing or jakaś pułapka. To nie jest. And I don't think it's a trap to start talking to the Iranian government in a serious way. Now, this is not easy, but we shouldn't think that diplomacy is like a light switch, you're on or you're off. And we need to start investing in the long term, both with diplomacy and outreach to people.
That's actually, I would say, the beautiful setup of this really small conversations of ours. And the third topic I would try to talk about today is, what is your perspective of current relations between USA and Poland? I would say Many times our government now and a lot of people on the streets are saying that US is our greatest ally. And I would say, tend to say it is. I remember when I was flying actually to Canada last year, and I've heard the message on board the plane that from today now on, the Polish people will have the easier way into United States. It was about the non-visa movement, and
Right, right.
that was beautiful message from me. That was thing which was mentioned by my grandparents as a huge dream, which they are always believing in, but they believe that that may be difficult to succeed ever. And now it happened. They were really very happy. And additionally, around 2 weeks ago, they received mail because my grandfather used to work in the United States around 30 years ago. And he received check from the bank as his money for retirement, which was unbelievable, and it was actually a circular letter signed by Trump, which was, from my perspective, that was beautiful. We never actually, that was the words of my grandmother. I never received any money from my family, but I received from another country, which is, from my perspective, a beautiful, fair behavior towards a people, which from my perspective is beautiful. What are your perspectives on those things and also the future of Polish-American relations?
Cieszę się to słyszeć. Taka dobra historia. Polish-American relations are indeed strong. They have been for decades. And the Trump administration, I think, has advanced them. And I give them credit. What Trump has done is to continue, in many ways, Obama's policy after the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2014. That is, it was Obama who led NATO to put in forces in the Baltics and Poland, and in addition, stationed a US armored brigade in Poland on a rotating basis. And Trump has continued that policy, and I want to give him credit. Trump has been constructive in his policy toward Russia, toward Putin. Toward Poland. He's been mixed in his policy toward Putin, but toward Poland, he has been good. I want to give Ambassador Mosbacher, the US ambassador in Poland, some credit for achieving the visa waiver program. She is influential in Washington. She knows how to push. She's not afraid to push, and she pushed for this. I think she deserves a lot of credit. US-Polish relations are good. At the same time, Poland is part of Europe, and Poland must never feel it has to choose between Europe and the United States. To nie jest wybór, to nie jest wybór. Polska to kraj europejski. In close alliance with the United States. This is a good thing. We want there to be a strong European Union. We want Poland to be an active leading member of the European Union. Polacy też walczyli, aby Polska stała krajem europejskim. So this is a good thing, and it is not a question of choice. We want a united West. That means Europe, the United States, Canada, and Poland as a part of an undivided Europe. Po to walczyliśmy, no, za waszą i naszą wolność, powiedzmy tak. So this, I think that Poland also, and the current Polish government, has actually done a pretty good job, at least attempting to convince Trump that a united Europe is better than the alternatives. I think it's a mistake for the United States to be seen as favoring one side in Poland, PiS albo Platforma, Nie ma sensu tego. We need to have good relations with whichever government the Polish people establishes. And we need to remember that democracy and the rule of law is the foundation of our relations. And since 1989, Polish governments, z prawicy, z lewicy, liberałowie, no, dziwne koalicja, all those different governments moved in this direction. And I hope that in the future, all Polish governments will do the same.
That's a great thing to have. And really the last thing to be asked from my perspective, I believe it's maybe a bit controversial, but just
Proszę
a
bardzo.
bit spice. What do you think about certain people in United Europe Council that are saying a lot of things about Poland, that it is now breaking the constitutional laws, that it is now becoming less and less European and less westernized, and it is more and more anti-modern world. It is mostly concerning the unofficial anti-LGBT zones which were created in Poland. However, don't you think it is a bit, maybe I shouldn't use the word, but isn't that a bit of overkill to say that little zones in 5 actually small administrative villages is the thing which whole country should be responsible for?
Oh, trudne pytanie, ale słusznie, słusznie. There are a great many things said about Poland in some Western countries. There have been concerns raised about the judiciary, the courts, and some of the changes that have been made do raise legitimate questions. There have been concerns raised about, including recently, about media freedom and the possible pressure in the future. These are sometimes exaggerated. Poland just had free elections. The Rafał Trzaskowski almost won. I mean, he ran a strong, positive campaign. You raised the issue of LGBT rights. Look, in the United States, over the past 15 years, public opinion has changed a lot. 15 years ago, I would have never thought that gay marriage would be legally recognized, and now it is. And society has accepted it. It changed, we changed very quickly. I think people in the West should understand that other countries may want time to work through these issues. I don't like some of the rhetoric, the anti-LGBT rhetoric I hear in Poland. But I also recognize that Poland, w ciągu ostatniego pokolenia, from 1989, has undergone tremendous transformation and modernization. Ja pamiętam dobrze, jak wyglądała Warszawa wtedy, po 1989 roku. I teraz. To nowoczesne europejskie miasto. Teraz. And the social debates in Poland are like debates we're all going through. Of course, Poland is a Western country because your debates are just like everybody else's. And we in the West need to be skromni wobec Polski i wobec zmian w polskim społeczeństwie. I mean, I have my views as an individual, but I also recognize that Poland needs to think about. Polish society needs to work through these issues. And I think people in the West need to be thoughtful in the way they talk. Now, look, I think the concerns about the judiciary are not made up. And, I think media freedom is critical. There's no reason to start, we need pluralistic media everywhere. But we shouldn't, Poland is a democracy. We need to remember that. And we in the West, na Zachodzie, we need to pick our issues carefully. So,
I mean,
próba do odpowiedzi.
I mean, that was the best, I would say, the best answer I could really count about. I mean, I'm really grateful for these words. And I believe this, as you say, the patience and the fact that all the states are different and the Poland went actually already under huge changes in the social thinking, in the social changes in understanding the views and beliefs, and that is changing all the time. And the fact that it will change, it is really great that you see that the change in the Polish society. And also, I'm very grateful for you mentioning that we just need to have a little bit more of time to adapt to the new world, to the new situations, which are pretty new, because actually Poland is truly independent for less than 40 years, actually less than 30 years. That's the time that is really huge, rapid changes in the social system, in the social values. And I'm really grateful that you are recognizing it. And I hope all of the people which are openly criticizing Poland will see this perspective and will more willing to aid than to give any penalties for just having the old thoughts from the old system. Because as you said, the times are changing and we just need a little bit of time and patience just to adapt. Thank you for all the talk and all the inspiring words you said. It's been really a great honor, and trust me, I'm so pleased that I could host you in this conversation. Thank you very much.
Cała przyjemność po mojej stronie. Jestem wdzięczny za możliwość i życzę panu i życzę UNA Polska sukcesu. Każdego
Thank you
sukcesu.
very much. Thank you
Wszystkiego
very much.
najlepszego.
Dziękuję bardzo.